car washes. We did whole days of washing cars, and we made like $35.
No.
But luckily, we got there in the end.
Sorry. So did you feel like the island really got behind it though? Once they saw what was happening, the people got behind it and supported it and they enjoyed seeing football back on the island, or was it a bit of a gradual kind of?
No, they did. And, everyone, because it's such a small island and everyone's pretty much related, everyone knew someone who was involved in some way. So, no, it really did get the support. And once people knew the players were going abroad, that was a big deal. A lot of the players had not left the island, almost all of them hadn't. And to go off the island to play sport is a really big thing. Yeah. So once it became real, it was a big switch when it was like, we are going to Guam on these dates. That was a big, big difference, because I think a lot of people talk about doing things and then don't actually deliver. Mm-hmm. I think like that's a massive, massive cultural thing, that if you're actually saying, look, we will do this, it doesn't mean an awful lot to them, and that's fair enough. Mm. So the moment that became a reality, it got pretty serious. And, we had a lot of people at the airport saying bye to us and stuff like that. And the weight of responsibility on us suddenly became huge, because we didn't actually know for sure. We weren't just leading this team to demolition again. And then we're right back where we started, 16-1 defeat, and everyone comes back and doesn't really want to play again. So
well, that must be quite a sobering moment when you see people when you see their expectations and they're seeing you off like a World Cup team. That must be quite a sobering moment, I suppose.
It was horrible. I mean, honestly, it was some of the most soul-searching moments where we got to Guam, got to their facility, which is like shiny and new, and got FIFA written all over it, and the pitch isn't flooded, it's flat. We're just like, and we knew this would be the case. We knew what we were getting into. We're trying to project confidence around the players, but they're watching league games going on around them, and they're just, they're in awe, because they've never seen, there's like 4 games going on at once. There's like people everywhere. It's like, oh my God, what are we doing? It's obviously me and Matt coaching the team. We basically had to project all this confidence, send the players, luckily they stayed on in the facility so that we could keep them under lock and key. They, 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds who'd never been off the island, and they're on this like Sin City island of kept under lock and key to the very end. But we sent them off to bed, and we just sat there and we were just like, what have we done? Like, what if we lose 30-0? Like, because in those days, especially, it's just going back 10 years, you couldn't watch footage. Like now, I could get probably a Guam second division game and stream it if I wanted to, and I'd have a fair idea. At that time, we were going on absolutely nothing to know because we were so in isolation with our training and our games, that we were just like, well, how do we know how we compare to a team in the Guam second division? We just don't know.
So before we move on to the other very interesting chapters of your life, what do you think is the legacy that you left behind in Pompeii?
Oh, I've got to say, it's one of the greatest sadnesses of my life. In a way, we did leave a legacy, and in a way, I would have been so sad if I'd known when we left where they were now. So since we left, our plan for leaving was basically, we need to leave. They need to become self-sufficient in what they're doing. So our players did basically learn to be the next generation of coaches, and they went back and they've done a great job of continuing. A lot of them have now left the island to go to the US to study, or for get on with their lives. But there are still our players on that island coaching kids, which is great. But what never happened, which was something we had hoped we'd set in motion, was that the FA there would start to access funding from Oceania football, or Asia football, just someone. And they've gone through a very tedious decade of being messed around by Oceania and Asia Football Confederation. And it's a little complicated because Pompeii is only one of the 4 islands that make up Micronesia, but they've gone in together to try and get funding, and they're still getting nothing. So in a way, I'm really proud that football continues to be played. It is growing, if anything, but I'm incredibly sad that when I left, I never thought 10 years on they wouldn't be getting a single penny of funding from anyone. It's just really tragic in its way. Can you think, in the context of what these islands are, some of the highest obesity rates in the world, very limited opportunities for children to sport, and you've got the game's governing body with billions to spend, and there's nothing coming their way. There's really only just sort of problems. They just present them with administrative hurdles they can't get through, basically.
Well, this is something, I don't know if you saw the documentary Last Goal Wins about the guys in American Samoa, where they go out and they're kind of facing the similar thing of like, they're just desperately trying to get a coach, trying to get balls, trying to get equipment. And FIFA, as you said, like to splash their names all over these brand new buildings, but they're also, there is always more they could be doing for these nations that
there is. It's funny. Isn't it? It's funny. These Next Goal Wins is an amazing underdog story, and it's a brilliant documentary, I've got to say. But it's funny how that to us is the Giants. I mean,
yeah, well, that's it. As I said it, I was like, American Samoa were actually like a fairly big island in terms of like islands, I suppose. Like,
I mean, it's like they're struggling to get funding, but yeah, they still will be eligible for whatever it is, $150,000, $200,000 a year. And when they do get a coach, that coach will be on $50,000, $60,000.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, admittedly, I really do think it's an amazing story. But what do you do if you're not even allowed that hurdle? Yeah. I think what's really interesting is you see places like the Cook Islands. And when the Cook Islands first started playing senior matches, they lost 30-0, 30, I don't know. They got absolutely demolished. But now they're competitive in the region. Yeah. And it's just that if you give people a chance, give them some funding, give them avenues to go down, that they can get there. There's no mystery to it. Yeah, it really is as simple as that. Like, of course, at the moment, if a Micronesia team played any FIFA nation, they would lose maybe 30 or 40-0. But how would they not? I mean...
Yeah. Like, you can't expect much more. But I think this is like maybe with the like Nations League, as they have like the smaller nations playing each other to kind of create competitiveness, maybe this is something that could be looked into in other continents as well, if you know what I mean. Because especially if you go to Oceania, the gulf between Australia, New Zealand, and everybody else is like huge.
Yeah, I mean, since Australia left, I mean, I'm glad in a way they left for competitive. Yeah. And then I think New Zealand obviously is a massive step above in terms of so many things. But I think it's really just there needs to be more competition for the second tier Oceanian nations.
Yeah,
it's not just Micronesia, Federated States Micronesia. You've got Kiribati and Tuvalu are struggling to get recognition from OFC. And even if they do now have associate membership, how are they going to afford to get teams to the competitions? It looks very unlikely they'll get funding for that. So it's this thing of like, okay, granted, Micronesia is never going to be a powerhouse of football. It's never going to be a World Cup qualifier. But it's something really boils my blood about not even giving people a level playing field in any regard. And sort of saying, well, that they're not doing enough to justify it. It's like such a catch-22. If you put some funding in and gave a coach to Micronesia and gave some structure, they would thrive, and then they would get more. But until you've got, how do you expect a nation like that to really build it? It's really tough.
Nice. So then there is another chapter that always starts with an M, but it's Mongolia. And do you think, so I read some things about you online. You describe yourself as a technical nerd. Correct me if I'm wrong. You've got a FA emergency medical training, correct?
I don't even know if I do. I've got an FA level 2 coaching qualification.
FIFA website.
Sorry?
So I found this information on the FIFA website. It says that you have an FA emergency medical training.
I'm not even sure I'm on the FIFA website, am I?
There's an article about you, buddy.
That's interesting. No, I mean, I'm an FA level 2 coach, which is basically like a very bog standard level.
I'm sending the link to you on the chat right now.
I mean, it will. Yeah, I have done you have to do like first aid in that and stuff. But yeah, I wouldn't say. I didn't know I was on any website with that. So.
All right, but then they called you from Mongolia to go coach a football team in Ulaanbaatar. Correct me if I'm wrong. The name of the capital that I probably mispronounced.
Yeah, in Ulaanbaatar. Yeah.
And how was receiving that phone call?
It was a bit of a shock again. I mean, after Micronesia, not an awful lot happened, basically because it's not easy to use that to leverage to get other jobs. But when I was approached, kind of out of the blue from Mongolia, it was basically because a guy called Enki Batsumba was had set up actually a breakaway league in Mongolia because the official league at the time was really ridden with match fixing. And what he wanted was a foreign coach to come in and set up a sort of flagship team that was really focused on developing young talent, because most of the teams just brought in players and then like brought in foreigners, and then they would win the league, and then the players would go. So when he approached me and explained this vision and this idea, I just was really intrigued by it. It wasn't like I was batting off offers from other teams. So I just kind of felt like this could be something I would want to get involved in, and took it on.
Nice. So when was this exactly? What year do you remember?
2013, that would have been October 2013.
All right. So you just packed and left for Mongolia. At this point, what was your family asking you? Like, you go to Micronesia first, and then you go to Mongolia.
Yeah.
Why don't you take a trip to Wales and just chill next to us, right?
I mean, my girlfriend, who's now my wife, was very supportive in the whole process. But it was like, I think it was again a sense of like, well, this is something I'm really passionate about, and there weren't really opportunities presenting themselves in this country at the time. And yeah, I think it was a sort of take it as it comes process. So I flew off to Ulaanbaatar in that October, and it was not, a lot of stuff was up in the air. The club that had just been set up seemingly had a sponsor, but it was a new club, so everything was a bit vague. And sure enough, when I got there, the sponsor had pulled out. It pulled out as I was mid-air, basically. So I got my flight paid for, arrived, and was told sponsors pulled out, and we had to rebuild everything from the ground up. Basically, we had just a name. We literally just had a name for the club, which was Bayangol, which is a region of the capital. And actually, the great thing, I got there and met Enki, who was the guy who'd approached me, and he said, things are not as they should be. This is bad. And said, but I've got a solution. I'm going to walk into a TV company's offices, and we're going to sell a reality TV show where you build the team.
Perfect.
But I was like, have you ever been... I'd been on the end of pitch meetings in the UK. It takes 6 months to even get a meeting. And then when you get one, it takes another 6 months to get a second one. I was like, what? And sure enough, he was like, nah, be fine. Without even a piece of paper in his hand, he just walked into the biggest TV channel in Mongolia, got a meeting with the head of development, like parading me like a sort of badge, I guess, just here's a foreign guy. And sure enough, we did get them to sponsor us within about 10 days. They had decided they would sponsor it as long as we promoted this soft drink that was linked to the TV channel and was to all intents and purposes undrinkable. But, we were willing to do what it took, and I was willing to drink litres of Fruta if that was what it took to...
What flavour was this drink? What?
It was we had several flavours. I remember it being red. It was sort of impossible to say what it was, really. It was red. And I had to drink it on the camera so we did this reality TV show. Kids came from all over the country. Kids came from the desert to come and try and be on this team. And most of what I had to do was drink this drink on camera. And I just... basically my task was not to wince as I drank it. But it was the craziest show ever, because the producers of the show couldn't speak English and I couldn't speak Mongolian. So I would just ramble in English until someone told me to stop, and nobody knew what I was talking about. And then we'd do these challenges that the producers had come up with, and they were basically all just dribbling around cones. So you never know if the player was any good, because you just dribble around 8 cones and they'd be like, oh, he's a good one. Yeah, but he just dribbled around 8 cones. I don't know if he's actually any good. And then they would have a game at the end, and that was basically the only thing that mattered. I'd just watch this game at the end and be like, okay, actually he looks quite good. And we chose 20 players or 20 something players to eventually be our squad. But it was absolute carnage. I mean, also it was about -20 at the time, so everything had to be done indoors.
I was about to say, October in Mongolia can't be much fun, right?
Yeah, it was bad. When I first got there, I said, look, can't we just do all these trials outside? Because I didn't really know. And it was only about 4 degrees at the time. It looked fine. And Enki just looked at me and said, yeah, but you're talking in 3 weeks' time. You're not worried the players might die? I was like, what? He's like, well, hypothermia. I looked at the forecast. I was like, oh, it's going to go to -8, -10. Yeah, so it was all indoors. And so we're trying to judge the abilities of these players by them dribbling around cones and then playing basically a form of futsal, football indoors. It's a miracle we ever got a team out of it at all, really.
So you said it was a breakaway league. So how many teams eventually made up this league? And was it all Ulaanbaatar based, or was it from kind of wider Mongolia? Or
yeah, this league was all Ulaanbaatar based, and it was, I think it was about 20 teams in the end. The interesting thing was, so it went through a few twists and turns, but basically this league only ran for a couple of seasons because the whole Mongolian Football Federation